Hey fools, it's John Rosevear. Automakers released their US sales numbers last week. There were some big gains for the big Japanese brands. Toyota, Honda, and Nissan all saw their sales go up over 20%, US sales, versus last August's numbers. That was enough to outpace the quite good gains we also saw from Ford and GM, who kind of fell behind a bit because fleet sales were in a bit of a lull in August to some extent. So what was up? Well, at least when it comes to America's still best-selling car, the Toyota Camry, apparently what was up was incentives. Toyota's U.S. sales leaders have been very clear that they want to protect, their word, the Camry's position as the best-selling car in America, and they've had some reason to be worried. Of course, Ford and GM's pickups are number one and number two, the Ford F-Series and the Chevy Silverado on America's sales charts. But after that, there's a bunch of sedans, starting with the Camry. So it is the best-selling car, not the best-selling vehicle, but the best-selling car. But it has actually lost some market share in the early part of the year because of new versions of the Honda Accord, the Nissan Altima, and the Ford Fusion have all made big gains in market share at the Camry's expense. And, you know, not counting pickup trucks, this market segment, mid-size sedan, is the biggest selling category of vehicles in the U.S. So these are all big money makers for their manufacturers. All of these cars rack up big sales numbers. In fact, Ford opened a second assembly line last month for the Fusion because its factory that was making it was working around the clock and still not keeping up with demand. Sales have been booming. Likewise for the Accord and for Nissan's Altima. Not so much for the Camry until recently. And the Accord especially has been gaining on the Camry and has actually outsold it for short periods here and there this year. And like I said, Toyota has been saying that they're determined to defend that top spot. And last month they showed it by cranking up the incentives, and they got a big sales boost out of it. Incentives are those cash back or cheap financing deals you see advertised on TV. $3,000 cash back or 0% financing. Those are incentives. They're funded by the automakers as a way to boost sales or just to adjust a model's pricing relative to newer competitors or whatever for a while. Sometimes they're only offered in certain parts of the countries, and sometimes they're nationwide deals. But according to estimates from Edmunds, which tracks this kind of stuff, Toyota's spending on incentives for the Camry in August was over $2,500 per vehicle. That's almost $700 more than they spent a year ago in last August, and it's a level of spending on incentives that we're not used to seeing from Toyota, which has historically been kind of stingy with this stuff. They just kind of prefer to set their starting prices a little lower instead and let the market do its thing. But now Toyota, like its Japanese rivals, has some extra headroom to play with financially because there have been exchange rate shifts where it's basically getting more yen for every dollar it earns than it did a year ago. That means it can earn a little fewer dollars here and still show a very nice profit in yen. And it means that Toyota is more willing to live with maybe thinner profit margins for a while, maybe a little bigger incentives that helps them accomplish other goals, like keeping the Camry in first place in car sales in the US. So what does this mean? Well, for one thing, we could expect Honda and Nissan at least to kind of come back at them. They have room to make their own discounts. And we'll also see how Ford responds. Ford's average transaction price on the Fusion has been significantly higher than the Camry even before these incentives. They've been selling it as a little more premium product with a little more premium pricing. They've kind of been able to do that because supplies have been tight and dealers have been getting top dollar for them. But with this new factory coming online, they're going to have 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 more Fusions every month to sell, as much as the capability to make that many anyway. And we're going to see, you know, once the supply of Fusions has increased, how many more can they really sell without having to give in a little bit on pricing, especially if all three of these Japanese automakers are kind of, you know, discounting with incentives and so forth. So this sales race is going to be very interesting to watch as it goes on, not just for people watching Toyota, but for people watching Honda, Nissan, and Ford, especially Ford here, who is kind of the sort of the surging interloper in this market as well. So we'll keep an eye on this for you. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening, and fool on.